Okie dokie. Get ready to move your...
In the 8 years that Rainworld has been released, it's grown from an underground hidden gem to a widespread phenomenon, with thousands of fans, tons of mods, and now 2 official DLC expansions in the form of Downpour and Watcher. To say this game has come a long way would be an understatement, and if you've seen just how many videos I've made about Rainworld, you know I'm a pretty big fan. However, with the Watcher fresh off the presses, reception has been mixed to say the least. Reviews on Steam show the stark contrast between it and the base game, and even Downpour, as the debate over whether the Watcher is good or bad has raged on ever since its release. And while both sides have made some interesting points, there's one thing that I've come to think about that's been discussed heavily during these past couple weeks. Rainworld is one of the most unique games I've ever played, and the DLCs have done a lot to expand upon the game and its formula, for better and for worse. Since they were both partly made by modders in the community, especially Downpour, they've provided their own influence on the game and shaped the expansions into what they ended up as. With the game back in the spotlight again, I feel it's time to look at what made the original product so special, and how the 2 expansions have reshaped it in wildly different ways to create the game that we see today. On March 28th, 2017, a little game was released to the world. A game where you run around a big map as a little guy and get killed over and over again. You know it, it's... And while it quickly slipped into the shadows, it still generated a small following of dedicated fans. And as for its critical reception...
Adam, I think it's fucking awful. I'm sorry, but I don't get it.
The issue is that there's just this anti-pattern of game design that grinded my gears heavily.
And for me, Rainworld's combat isn't executed well.
I'm just hopelessly wandering around going through shitty pipes.
Having to trudge through the same area a dozen times isn't just a grind, it's boring.
The slug cat is so heavy, there's nothing special about it, there's no cool wall jumping or just a fast jump or fast movement. You're very underpowered.
And ultimately became fairly frustrating because I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
Trying to find somewhere new, it's like I eventually get eaten by a fucking big lizard.
Amazingly responsive controls. Immersive ambient sound that creates a unique atmosphere. Cool, innovative style, which tries to mimic a real ecosystem. To add to that, it is somewhat supplemented.
But the sheer cruelty of how it's paced out transcends challenge and becomes an unwanted trial.
Let's just say that Rainworld was grilled pretty hard upon its release, with most citing its harsh difficulty and repetitive exploration as hindrances to an otherwise fascinating experience. But of course, it was meant to be like this, because this isn't your typical Metroidvania platformer where you're suited up as the hero with all these upgrades. Mr. Survivor Slugcat is a weak, pathetic little creature who serves as prey for pretty much everything around you, and the entire game is learning how to interact with the ecosystem and rise above your predators.
So the whole idea behind Rainworld is it's this huge ecosystem with that everything is kind of interconnected. You play one little part, but everything is kind of doing its own thing, and you sort of have to just get along as a little squishy slugcatty thing.
In fact, the connected ecosystem is part of what makes Rainworld so special, as everything exists regardless of your actions, instead of orbiting around you. Lizards will hunt you down, climb poles and charge at you to end your run, but they can also go after other critters, or even fight each other. Noodleflies carry their young around with them, and if anything dares touch them, then they will feel the wrath of 7 red angry suns upon them. Interactions like these are found all throughout the entire game, and it reinforces the belief that this world is truly alive, and you are just a small part in a larger landscape, fighting like everything else to simply survive. Most of the game follows this loop of searching for food and avoiding predators, while progressing to new areas to explore some more. Of course, Rainworld is not easy. Far from it, as the first area, Outskirts, is basically a litmus test for determining if a new player is going to stick around. When you start a new save, the only things the game tells you is how to move, how to find food, and how to do a basic long jump. And also that the rain will dissolve your body if you run out of time. The rest is all up to you, fella. Discovering how the various creatures work and how to evade them, finding the best sources of food and planning the most efficient route to get what you need before the rain comes, and of course, surviving enough times in a row to get enough karma to move on to the next area is all left to your own skill and knowledge. You have a guide that kinda helps you out in the form of Iggy, who can show you where food and shelters are, and also points you forward towards an objective. But let's just say this thing is kinda unreliable. Needless to say, you will die a lot. And you will get frustrated and say it's unfair and stop playing. Well, that's what my first playthrough was. In fact, let me take you back to a simpler time. February 2022 to be exact. I was playing this game for the first time on the Nintendo Switch, purchasing it because it looked similar to Ori and Hollow Knight. Oh, how wrong I was. I struggled to get through Outskirts and then got crushed over and over and over in Shaded Citadel. Then I made my way to Shoreline and met Moon, where I did the most logical action and killed her. Because of that, Iggy decided to leave and no longer guided me. And so, with absolutely no idea where to go next, I decided to unknowingly throw myself into hell. Otherwise known as going to Drainage System and then Subterranean, where I went all the way down to the bottom of the world only to realize I couldn't beat the game because I didn't have enough karma. And I was met with lots and lots and lots more death, and eventually I was stuck with no hope of escape. What a fun game! But of course, the charm of Rain World is the process of learning about the world, gaining the knowledge needed to not just survive, but thrive. Learning new movement tech like wall jumps, backflips, and whatever else is in this giant document to help me get an edge over my foes. With enough practice, I was able to make it out of Subterranean, and from there, the game got a lot better, as I was introduced to the second aspect of what makes Rain World so special, and that is the interconnected world. One thing that makes a great Metroidvania world is seeing how everything fits with each other, and how the entire map comes together to make a cohesive experience for gameplay and for story. Of course, Hollow Knight is a great example of this. The City of Tears is raining because it sits under a giant lake. Multiple trains are seen throughout the map that can take you to various places, and there's even a ruined one in Deep Nest that presumably used to serve the same purpose. Things like that help make the world feel believable, like you really are exploring the ruins of a once great civilization. And Rain World accomplishes this with flying colors. As you go and discover new regions, the pieces begin to fall into place on how it all connects. Outskirts and Industrial Complex were likely one big city at some point. Shaded Citadel is shaded because it has a giant goddamn megastructure above it. Garbage Waste has rot in it because Pebbles tried flushing it out, and that's where it ended up. And just seeing all these ruins and destruction in the background and imagining what it could have been in the past, it adds to the mystique and wonder of the world. These giant worm things in Shoreline have always been fascinating, as well as these big fleshy cube things in memory crypts. Do they need to be explained? No, not really. But the fact that they're there just makes the world feel much more alive. And of course there is actually material stuff to find as well, in the form of pearls, which you can have Moon read them to give some juicy lore. And speaking of which, the story, while obtuse and convoluted to put together, still leaves some intrigue as to why things are the way they are. I'm not gonna go too in-depth with the deep lore and whatnot, but at least in the base game, the story serves as a nice supplement to explain what's happening, but it's not the main thing that kept me going. What made me stick around were the unique experiences, moments like no other where the game truly shines. I'll never forget my first experience entering Five Pebbles. Like, when I heard the name for the first time, I was imagining some old monk sitting there with his 5 little rocks. Needless to say, floating around in zero gravity traversing a giant supercomputer is the last thing I would have expected to see. the small bits of world building that are given to us, like the Karma murals and the city atop Pebbles. And of course, the beautiful vista atop the wall and seeing the other iterators in the distance. This was the moment where I fell in love with this game. Then there's the Hunter, which was the first real take at shaking up the game's formula. Unlike Survivor, where it was best to run and hide from predators, now you have to actively seek them out to fill your belly. Hunter's better fighting abilities make them the perfect candidate to dish out some pain for sure. But the biggest challenge comes in taking the knowledge you already know about the world and putting it to the test, as you have to plan your route and fulfill your mission under a strict time limit. Of course, on a second playthrough, a natural thought is to go see the two biggest landmarks in the game, Moon and Pebbles. And with the Hunter, you not only have to be cautious about your approach, but also be willing to take risks to ensure you can do everything you can with the time you have. It provides a more strategic outlook on the game, and it's one that's very welcome, as the Hunter's one of my favorite campaigns. It's also the first campaign to have a bigger emphasis on story, as you bring the green neuron to revive Moon after she collapsed, and in the end we learned that Hunter was sent out by another iterator. Even back in the base game, Hunter existed to provide an alternative take on the Rain World formula, and the threads were being sewn for what would come down the line. And of course, I can't forget to mention the music, which is just awesome. There's so many good tracks that it would take forever to talk about them. Good thing I already made a video where I yap all about it for 46 minutes, god damn! But to summarize, the things that made Rain World unique and special were interacting with the ecosystem, the game's tough but rewarding gameplay loop of learning as you go, the lore that was cryptic enough to provide intrigue but also give you enough pieces to build interest, and the environmental storytelling found all throughout the world. But most of all, Rain World really made you feel like a helpless, pathetic little critter, cast into the world and forced to adapt and overcome. Sure, there's the larger story of the iterators and the ancients and ascending and the triple affirmative and all that stuff, but that doesn't really concern you. The only thing you care about is surviving, and you're merely just passing through the story that's unfolding. Even with the Hunter, who can more than fend for themselves and has a larger role in the story, you still have to deal with the inevitable end of their journey looming over you. This world wants you dead, but it's also a playground for you to poke around places you don't belong, see things that weren't meant to be seen, and find meaning in a place that's been long forgotten by the passage of time. Even after 2 expansions, nothing matches that feeling nearly as well as it did on that first Survivor playthrough, and perhaps they never stood a chance to. So, instead of trying to replicate something that cannot be replicated, the devs decided to take Rain World in different directions, and breathe new life into a simple little indie game. On January 19th, 2023, Rain World Downpour was released, bringing an absolutely insane amount of content to the game for just $15. Man, this is the steal of the century. The main draw, of course, was the 5 new campaigns, each with their own abilities, new regions, and story to unravel. Well, I say unravel, it's more like the game pretty much gives you everything you need to know. While the base game kept its lore obscure and esoteric, Downpour puts the story at the forefront, particularly with Moon and Pebbles, and how their relationship progresses throughout each campaign. They're given a much bigger focus now than before, with pretty much everyone having some form of interaction with them, and some even going as far as providing pivotal plot points. You're not passively observing the story anymore, you're a critical role in it. And as for the Slugcats themselves, well, gone are the days where you're just a weak little creature. Instead, you have Slugcats who can craft literal atom bombs, make their own explosives, run at the speed of sound, produce infinite spears, and of course, become God! Each new Slugcat brings something new to the table in terms of how they're played and how you interact in the world. Gourmand is the closest to the base game, except of course he's rotund. And Rivulet is basically giving crack to a wild animal. Artificer and Spearmaster are more combat focused, much like Hunter was. Only now you get the benefit of crafting your own bombs and having as many spears as you want to get food, without the worry of a time limit. Of course, they were made to not only bring a fresh new experience, but to also complement that character's campaign. Gourmand is the most like vanilla because he's basically a legend among the Slugcat colony, as his story is literally being retold by others as he makes his way back to his homeland. Artificer uses those explosives to basically wreak havoc on an entire species. Rivulet's gotta move fast because the rain also comes much faster. Spearmaster is an artificial Slugcat like Hunter was, explaining their unnatural abilities. And Saint, well, we'll get to them. The point is that these Downpour Slugcats are not just some insignificant little animals, but prominent forces that play a huge part in how the game's lore unfolds. While it works in providing fun new gameplay, it also loses a bit of what made the base game so unique. Now you're just some overpowered creature, and the world is but your plaything as you plow your way through it. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. And that's not to say the game is easy now, because it sure as hell isn't. If there's one thing that's consistent with all these updates, it's that Rainworld remains a hard game. Naturally, each character has their own weaknesses as well. Gourmand gets tired quickly, Artificer can't swim, and also has to deal with 5 million scavengers, oh my god! Rivulet has rain every 2 seconds, and so on. And no matter how powerful you are, you still die in one hit. Well, unless you're Giga Chad Gourmand. Damn, this guy built different. And the new creatures introduced will bring a challenge in learning how to counter them, like the new lizards, elite scavengers, and whatever this unholy abomination is. But the game as a whole is still easier than vanilla, mainly due to the fact that you'll be playing these guys on subsequent playthroughs, meaning you already have the knowledge gained from playing the game already. Of course, that's unavoidable when making an expansion, which is why Downpour twists the formula by having you do other things instead of dumping yourself into yellow goo. But the feeling of being lost and not knowing where to go is pretty much gone, as the world is still mostly the same for every new campaign, and everybody knows the first course of action is to go see Moon and Pebbles, who then explicitly tell you what to do from there. The game isn't designed in a linear way. If you were to play Gourmand first, then you can explore everywhere and not know where you're going. It's just our pre-existing knowledge of the game that makes Downpour feel more linear. And every campaign is like this, with one exception, which does make it feel a bit repetitive. While the entire world is there for you to explore, it's not necessary to do so, and you're wandering through the same places you've already seen, with the only change being different enemy spawns. For Rivulet and Artificer, the entire left side of the map is basically pointless, as all the action, of course, happens around the two iterators. If you're roaming familiar grounds, then the sense of discovery and exploring the unknown is gone. There are new regions to find, though. 10 new ones, in fact. Although, there's a catch. You know how many regions are available to everybody? 1. Just Pipeyard, that's it. Every other new region is exclusive to only some Slugcats, which does help make them stand out, as it gives them unique places to explore, and the devs can design them around their abilities. The story will guide them to these new places anyway, but it also makes getting to these new areas kind of a chore, as you're still walking through good old industrial complex for the 5th time. When you do find something new though, man, these regions absolutely slap. I've always wanted to see what Pebble City looked like up close, and Metropolis basically granted that wish. Outer Expanse is such a foreign place compared to everywhere else, naturally, as it's outside the facility grounds. Submerged superstructure is haunting to explore, as you're basically poking around the remains of a giant metallic corpse. Ideas and concepts that were only hinted at in the base game are now fully realized, and exploring these new areas are the best parts of Downpour. And these new regions also excel in telling their story through the environment, just as good as the base game did. Not only do we have fun new areas to see, but fitting them in with the larger world is part of the joy as well. Another notable feature is that each Slugcat takes place on a different part of the timeline, which means we get to see unique perspectives on pre-existing places, like how Spearmaster and Artificer get to see Garbage Waste and Shoreline look completely different in the past. And of course, Spearmaster gets to explore Moon's Can when she was still functional, something that's just so awesome. Rivulet, on the other hand, is the second to last in the timeline, and at this point the rot has spread so much inside Pebbles that it's transformed his can into something unrecognizable. And while this place can kinda be a pain to navigate, it's still absolutely fascinating to see familiar places be altered by the passage of time. And don't worry, I'll get to Saint, just hold on! But as you make your diligent trek up to see your robot friends, the gameplay does take a backseat to the larger narrative. While some, like Gourmand and Artificer, are less about the story and more just being told where to go, Rivulet and Spearmaster play integral parts to the game's lore. And by integral, I mean you basically become glorified delivery boys in both. Seriously, why take a character who can hold 2 spears and force them to carry a pearl around the entire map and you can't even store it in your belly? But of course, the more plot-centric campaigns also lead to some great moments, and they all serve as endings for their respective Slugcat. Every new character, except one, has an ending involving something new that's not just ascending. And the whole theme of the DLC seems to revolve around finding your own purpose and happiness in life, rather than taking a dip in the void. Gourmand literally just indulges in the simple pleasures of the day. Artificer is too consumed by rage and fury to move on. And Rivulet and Spearmaster just kinda chill with their iterators. Even Survivor and Monk get new endings where they return to the colony instead of ascending. And of course, the Saint Undergrowth Echo literally spells it out for us. Why did they always search for an escape, as if we were imprisoned? What offering from the void could usurp the gift of life already given? This moment, right here, it is where we are meant to be. In a way, it kinda flies in the face of the base game, where Ascension was the only ending, and what the game's lore centers around. But it's not meant to hinder the original's themes, but instead it offers a different perspective. It's not bad, it's just different. And that leads us to what is pretty easily the best campaign in Downpour, the Saint. This is the one campaign where the feeling of exploring the unknown and being rendered weak and helpless is somewhat restored. Sure, you're in the same world as everyone else, but everything is different, as the lands are all coated in a thick layer of snow. Instead of hiding from the rain, you now have to keep yourself warm and seek shelter from freezing to death. The entire world has been flipped on its head, and all you can do is swing around with your tongue. Saint can't even throw spears, leaving them as by far the weakest of the bunch. The snow gives every region a fresh new take, reinforced by the fact that this is the far future, and that every region now has new names to indicate the passage of time. Seeing the world in this state was breathtaking. A place we once thought we knew has been forever altered, though it can still be recognizable if we look hard enough. And some places have been even more dramatically changed, like how drainage has been transformed into a lush paradise, free from the oppressing cold, and Shaded has been transformed into a better region by being absolutely destroyed. Heading over to where you would go to the wall from Chimney, only to see nothing there, has gotta be one of the best moments in the game, and Silent Construct and its implications alone make it one of my favorite regions in the game. While the other campaigns did kind of feel repetitive, it also built a sense of familiarity with running around the same map over and over again. You know where everything is and how this place works because you've explored this map so many times. But Saint excels at taking what we thought we knew and turning it upside down. And then of course the game throws another loop at you when you basically get god powers and then ascend everything and then go to hell, and that's basically a whole nother thing. From beginning to end, Downpour provides a new take on the standard formula of Rain World. In some ways, it sacrifices aspects of what made the base game great, like the feeling of being alone and helpless and discovering a new world, in exchange for a greater emphasis on the story and a more linear approach. Of course, that's what the devs were out to accomplish, to provide a new experience for those who've already gotten familiar with the game. It's not bad, far from it actually, as Downpour is what fully solidified Rainworld as one of my favorite games of all time. But it is different, and in its own way, it's beautiful because of it. Now, what if we took everything that made Downpour unique and pivot in the complete opposite direction? Well, you would get going into The Watcher, me and many others weren't exactly sure what to expect. The trailers kept information about the game vague, with the only concrete details given being a new character and new regions. Not much else was shown in the days leading up to its release, but on March 28th, 2025, The Watcher was bestowed upon us. And it is something. This is your final warning. Watcher spoilers from here on out. Do not watch the video if you care about spoilers. So, if Downpour took the game in a more plot-heavy linear direction, then The Watcher could not be any more different. You're thrown into an entirely new world, with regions connected by portals instead of physical gates, with brand new creatures, environments, everything. It explores the world of Rainworld, far beyond what we've previously seen. And in that aspect, it succeeds. Kinda. Let's talk about the world first, as it's the biggest difference. While Vanilla and Downpour had you walking through virtually the same map up to 8 times in a row, The Watcher plunges you into a complex maze of portals with 23 regions to come across. Well, I say 23, but it's actually Aether Ridge and its 500 cousins. Seriously, why does Aether Ridge need to be broken up into 6 different regions? And these are wildly different places. Some with crazy environments like Signal Spires, Fetid Glen, and Verdant Waterways. And others that can be seen as being set in different times, or different dimensions altogether. Like Outer Rim, Demon, and oh! What the hell is that? The only time you'll see anything from the base game is at the very beginning, and in sparse intervals where everything gets covered by rot. Which the prelude does force you down a linear path to see the echoes by closing off some sections of the old map. But the devs are kinda wanting you to see the new content, and also we've gone through these regions how many times before? And if they weren't closed off, then this beginning section could have felt bloated, and we would have all been left wondering, where's the new content? But I digress. Once you're thrown into this new world, you're left entirely helpless on what to do and where to go. Your only objective you can gather is finding more echoes, which is what the prelude taught you. But that's about it. There's no overseer to help guide you, you're all on your own in this confusing place. It's about as non-linear as Rainworld can get, and this is mainly why Watcher is so difficult to so many, not because of tough gameplay, but due to navigating this expansive world. In a way, it's like the base game experience, where you have no idea where to go and are left to figure things out about the world and the creatures that inhabit it. But there's a key difference between Vanilla and Watcher, and that's while the base game had some consistency between places and you could see how they all were interconnected, the Watcher kinda throws all that out. Since these places are not physically connected anymore, the world feels disjointed and lacks the cohesive connections that Vanilla had. In exchange, of course, you get to have some great variety, from the frigid cold of the surface to hot deserts like the Badlands. But the interconnectivity of it all is lost in Watcher, especially when all you're looking for in these places are echoes and portals to take you to another place. There's no pearls or collectibles to find anywhere, mainly due to the fact that Watcher isn't even finished, but that's a whole nother can of worms. And later on you get the ability to make your own portals. While in Vanilla it can take hours to advance from one region to another, you can warp through 5 different places in the span of mere minutes in the Watcher. And sure, some regions are definitely better than others, which is something the base game excelled at. Quality over quantity is something the Watcher could have benefited from, like not having Aether Ridge be repeated 6 times. But the exploration itself is what you're here for, and the Watcher provides a much needed breath of fresh air in a game that admittedly was getting a little stale with running around the same world over and over. It feels less like a DLC and more like a sequel in how everything is so foreign to the original. But the core tenet of being a lost little critter in a big world remains, although there's still work they can do to make exploring more worthwhile. Like maybe adding some more unique landmarks and substance to some of these places, and also redesigning others. Looking at you, Aether Ridge! It rings especially true when you see how some of these regions feel a bit half-baked, which makes more sense when you realize places like Stormy Coast were broken up into 3 separate regions. And there's plenty of dead ends to be found, which probably used to be connections to other regions, but were removed thanks to the portal system. Navigating around this world can be quite a hassle sometimes, especially with how confusing this map is, as there's very little structure to go off of, like how Chimney Canopy is clearly connected to Sky Islands and the Wall. If you're trying to get from one place to another, it can take forever going through all these portals, or trying to make your own and just hoping the game puts you where you need to be. It's definitely very different from the base game in that department. And while I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, I can understand why some may not like this approach. Also, unlike Downpour, you're not some crazy overpowered force of nature. Well, okay, sometimes you aren't. Sure, the invisibility power is a bit OP, but the whole point of it is so you can avoid enemies. And aside from that, you're basically playing like a normal slugcat, who can casually dig their way through space and time, of course. And there's a ton of new creatures to be found, and learning what they can do and seeing how they interact with others is just as interesting as in the base game. These moth things, the sandworms, the drill crabs, the sky whales, ooh! And of course, everyone's favorite, the stupid barnacles! However, while you can still see these creatures interacting with each other like in the base game, with the moths carrying away lizards and the new scavengers doing their thing, other times it does feel like the ecosystem is not as prominent as it was before. This is partly due to every region being so distinct from each other, and there's very little overlap between them both in terms of background elements and creatures. It's hard to piece together how these places fit with each other when they're so different, and also how you warp between them all so quickly. The world of the Watcher is a completely alien one, both in terms of the regions themselves and how you navigate through them. And while it's a big departure from the base game, it was a deliberate move by the developers to allow for more varied regions, and to explore new concepts never before seen.
Oh my god!
The rot, while it's always been an ever-present force, was limited to just pebbles. But here you can see its impact throughout the whole game, as you can find yourself in rotted variations of the base game regions, and even spread it to other places. And of course, there's the big rot daddy himself, which opens up a whole new avenue of interpretation. This ties into how the story of the Watcher takes more from the base game and how it's presented. Unlike Downpour, nothing is really explicitly told to you, and you're left to put the pieces together on what's going on. And while Downpour focused heavily on the iterators, Watcher explores things that were previously left vague or underutilized, or expanding and giving new takes on already existing concepts, like how the rot can spread throughout the whole world, and a lot more information on the ancients, which leads into the other ending where, oh my god, there's ancients! Oh, there's real ancients! Oh my god! And yes, there are lots of things that are left unexplained, and you're left to fill in the gaps yourself. You could say that this is the developers being intentionally vague and not wanting to give any meaning to an already confusing story. There's not really any concrete thing you can latch onto and say is a cold hard fact. But the Watcher does give you enough to generate discussion, if you pay attention, and it allows you to build your own interpretation of the story and what's going on. It's a lot of showing and not much telling. It doesn't lack substance, rather the mystery is the substance, much like the base game. Seeing people theorize about the endings and all the different meanings you can derive from it, it's part of what makes Rainworld so special. Downpour did a lot of telling the player exactly what was going on, And of course, that's what it was trying to do, and it does a great job at it. But The Watcher was meant to be different, to provide a new perspective on things. And in that department, it succeeds. It combines the obtuse and mysterious lore from Vanilla with the cool-ass reveals and moments from Downpour to create a story that, while it can be hard to comprehend, it still stands up there as being just as good as its predecessors. As for my own take on what's going on, Vanilla was all about the road to ascension, how the ancients sacrificed everything to achieve it, and how it represents an escape from the cruel cycles of the world. Downpour was about finding meaning in the little things in life, and discovering that existence is something to be cherished. The Watcher, then, at least in my eyes, is about learning to move on from your past and face the future. Both the Watcher and the Echo are haunted by their past, as the former had to watch their family be killed and was left alone when they all ascended, and the latter feels like their family has forgotten about them as they've been tethered to this world, separated by fate. They go on reminiscing about old times, where they would run down the halls and play with their toys. In the end, both learn to let go and embrace what they have, with the Echo passing on and the Watcher indulging in the simple pleasures of life for the first time and probably ever, by just lying down and playing with some toys. They get to have the childhood they never got, and both can finally be at peace. And as for the other ending, the rot spreads everywhere, rot consumes, it ascends, rot triple affirmative, question mark? I'm gonna be real, I have no idea what's going on here, man. Of course, The Watcher isn't perfect, as there's many changes that could be made to improve the overall experience. And judging by the fan reaction, the direction the game went in was divisive to say the least. The map can be made easier to understand, portals should be marked, the process of getting the rot ending is pretty tedious, and these stupid crab things need to burn in hell. All of these are valid criticisms, and hopefully they'll be addressed. Hello, this is Future Kyle editing this, and in the patch, the crabs were actually fixed. Wowee! They actually move now if you stand near them long enough, and you can use snails to pop their shells. Look at that, only a couple little changes was all it took to take the worst creature in the whole DLC and make them actually bearable. Thank you, Video Cult. When you shake up the formula this much, naturally not everyone will be pleased, and that's okay. While Downpour was great in its own right, it did play it safe with its execution, while The Watcher took bold new risks that were bound to leave some confused. It's not quite the base game, and it's definitely not like Downpour. Instead, it's something else entirely. And while it can definitely be improved, it still deserves to stand on its own as a unique take on the Rainworld experience. In the end, The Watcher and Downpour take the base game and shift it in their own image, creating something new from what we already had. Two different perspectives on an already unique and special game, and while neither are flawless, they both stand tall as contrasting takes on the formula and worthwhile additions to the overall package. Where they go from here, who knows? And hopefully The Watcher will get updates that allow it to truly stand head-to-head with its counterparts. But no matter what, Rainworld will always be a special game, as these three parts come together to create an experience truly like no other. Now, if only they didn't destroy the workshop when updating the game. Okay, thanks for watching, bye!